Okay, I know it's been quite a while since we've done this. No script, raw thoughts type deal. So I decided, hey, I've been reading this comic that I haven't read for a good while, so I might as well talk about it. Now, if you've been someone who's been reading American comics for a while or Image comics for a good while, you probably have heard of Hickman's East of West, which granted, it's nowhere near as big as something like a Saga or a Spawn, but it did get pretty high, and it was in a lot of stores, and its first issue cover was in a lot of places, in a lot of storefronts, so there was definitely a good strong reading base on it. And I remember being not exactly up to date on it, but I did read it to a good point, to a good extent, and I remember liking it quite a lot. I actually liked the series in general overall quite a lot, but it's been a long time since I've read it, so I don't know if my judgment is on par to how it was back then. Case in point, Saga. We all know how that turned out. But so far, already a couple issues in, that's clearly not the case. Hickman is a damn good writer. He's a good namesake for a damn good reason. If you've read any of his runs, if you've read any of his other stories, you know he knows exactly what he's doing when it comes to writing, or at least some of his best stories. He knows exactly what he's doing with in terms of characters, plot, progression, pacing, etc., etc. Case in point, his run on Fantastic Four is just flat out phenomenal and damn near iconic, if you know what I mean, which if you don't, go and read it or at least check up on it. It is fucking awesome. There is a fantastic scene with an adult Franklin Richards summoning Galactus, and it's just amazing in just so many different ways. But let's jump back to East of West. Hickman does a great job of planting seeds early on. He knows how to plant hooks into a story to get you invested. Already in the beginning, we see that this world is indeed America, but it's a very different America than the one we live in today. Not only is it the future, but actually we see that things kind of happen quite differently than they did in our timeline. We see it's been divided between 4 different groups. After the Civil War, there was a massive event that actually happened that divided the US, and it all, funny enough, feels unique. It doesn't feel silly. It feels somewhat believable, but in a very fantastical kind of way. And it does kind of harken back to the old school serials of Flash Gordon, comics like Mobius, if you've ever read that. Very out there, semi-sci-fi concepts while still blending in old genres like westerns or even a pirate theme, that type of stuff. And here it is blended incredibly well. You get that this is a very rich and lived-in world. We get the sense that there is a lot more going on than just the main plot itself, which is always a plus for someone like me who's a sucker for world building and a sucker for just out there concepts, out there sci-fi concepts in general, which is one of the many reasons why I read this in the first place way back when. And you can tell that Hickman actually has a really good imagination when it comes to these types of things. Now, the plot itself, or at least how things begin, is rather, it's a John Hickman story. There's a lot more going on than what we actually initially thought in the first couple issues. And for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to give you the basic summary rundown for issue 1-ish. Now, in this world, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse roam the earth. And the main character, the character that we follow, is actually Death. We see that he is actually broken away from his 3 siblings and is doing his own thing. We later learn that he's on a mission for revenge. We see they actually betrayed him and that he is gunning after the ones that have wronged him, and we do see more and more. There's a lot more going on under the surface. Not to mention that there are other plots and schemes going on in between the governments in the background, but they do matter and they do pop up later on down the line. The story does do a really good job early on of establishing just how dangerous and powerful these 4 entities actually are. Death himself is just flat out badass. His dialogue, of how he's framed, everything. You get how people are just terrified of him and that he is just God's vengeance personified. He is pissed, he is enraged, and he has a mission. But that's not to also mention that his 3 siblings are also a big threat. Even though they have been recently reincarnated, and in this universe, the 4 horsemen get reincarnated or reborn every so now and again into their younger selves. So, case in point example, War before his rebirth was a fully grown female but now after his rebirth is now just a male child. But they still retain their personality, their memories, and their power. As we see how things progress and go forward, we see how fucking crazy they actually are, and that they are just as dangerous, if not arguably more dangerous than death is. And as the comic progresses, other characters do come up and become part of the main cast. They have their own strengths, weaknesses, and funny little dynamics that they work off the main cast of the actual story. There's also a plethora of several twists, turns, and just flat out rug pulls that you honestly didn't really expect. Thus, when you go back and reread it, you do notice that there are some hints along the way. So far, I'm only a couple issues in my reread at the moment, but still, I do recommend East of West full-heartedly. I'm trying my best not to spoil literally everything that goes on, especially when it comes to death and his relationships with other people. There's a lot more to that character than just him being, well, God's vengeance with a revolver. He has a personality, he has his own wants, needs, and desires, like anybody else, which humanizes him to an extent, which is what made Darksiders 2's version of death worked so well, if I was going to make a comparison. So yeah, wrapping up my final thoughts on East of West. Like I said, go out and read it when you can. It's a legit badass story. If you like sci-fi, westerns, neo-westerns, or just alt history stuff, you will love this. Not to mention that the artwork itself is also breathtaking. There are many moments where I will just stop and just look at what's going on and not even read the dialogue, just because of how just amazing and gorgeous the art design actually is. It is freaking awesome. So yeah, those are my final thoughts. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you've read the comic, be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Take care and stay chill, Wanderers.